This is you, eating pho, drinking Vietnamese iced coffee, thinking this is great. Vietnam must be great.
Surely it couldn't have a dark past, right? It definitely wasn't the site for colonialism, a brutal civil war, the US's first defeat, and every democratic country's favorite thing.
Communism. Huh? The year is 1858. You're an average Vietnamese farmer, growing crops to raise your family. Suddenly, a pale man with a mustache appears.
Wow, look at all this land. Hey, you! What's this place called?
Vietnam?
Vietnam, huh? Well, nope. Now it belongs to us. I'll call it French Indochina.
After a series of military invasions, battles, and defeats, the French successfully colonized Vietnam. And with the invasions and colonization of Cambodia and Laos, France named the region Indochine Française, or French Indochina. By 1893, they had full control over the region. The arrival of the French had sparked nationalist movements due to exploitation and repression. That's where we get this guy, Ho Chi Minh, a revolutionary leader who advocated for Vietnamese independence. He was also a communist. World War II and the First Indochina War. Let's fast forward to September of 1940. World War II is being waged across the world, and France had just fallen to Nazi Germany. Due to France now being weakened, a country by the name of Japan took the opportunity to invade northern Vietnam. Due to the French already having administrative control, they decided to opt for co-occupation, allowing the French Vichy government to continue administering the colony. Japan had military control, and French officials ran the administration. On March 9, 1945, Japan launched a coup d'etat, completely removing the French administration.
こんにちは、フレンチマンさん。
Hi?
もうあなたは必要ありません。
After disarming French forces, they declared Vietnam independent under Emperor Bao Dai, who was essentially a puppet under the Japanese government. But by August 1945, Japan surrendered to the Allies, and World War II had now ended. This, however, left a power vacuum in Vietnam. Remember this guy, Ho Chi Minh? He and his forces, called the Viet Minh, quickly moved to gain control. This resulted in the August Revolution, and on September 2, 1945, Ho Chi Minh, citing the United States Declaration of Independence, declared Vietnam independent. Now the French still believed Vietnam was a French colony. One thing led to another, and fighting broke out between French colonial forces and the Viet Minh, resulting in the First Indochina War. This conflict showcased major guerrilla warfare, especially in the north. The conflict lasted nearly 8 years before the decisive Battle of Dien Bien Phu, which resulted in the Viet Minh's victory. Both sides later met at the Geneva Accords to come to a peace agreement. Vietnam had become an independent state, but had been divided by the 17th parallel, a geographical line of latitude 17 degrees north of the equator. The north was controlled by Ho Chi Minh and the communist regime, while the south was controlled by an anti-communist government led by a man named Ngo Dinh Diem. The division was only meant to be temporary, and an election was planned for 1956 to unify the nation under one government. The election never came to pass. President Ngo Dinh Diem refused to hold the election, even though Ho Chi Minh supported it. Diem claimed that the North would not hold a free and fair election. The failure of an election to occur is what set the stage for the Vietnam War. Early U.S. involvement. The 1950s were also when the U.S. and Russia were in the Cold War. The Cold War brought about many different beliefs, including one named the domino theory. The U.S. believed that if one country fell to communism, other surrounding countries would soon follow suit, like dominoes. Vietnam was seen as a crucial point in stopping the spread of communism in Southeast Asia. After the failure for an election, North Vietnamese leaders headed south and founded the National Liberation Front, also known as the Viet Cong. Their goal was to reunify the country under communist rule. The official name, however, was meant to sound broad and inclusive, appealing to all those who opposed the South Vietnamese government, not just communists. They began to engage in guerrilla warfare against Diem's southern government, and the Vietnam War had begun. North Vietnam needed a way to support the Viet Cong without crossing heavily guarded borders. To do this, they created Military Unit 559, which was tasked with developing and managing a supply route, now known as the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The trail consisted of a series of paths, roads, and trails stretching through the dense jungles of Laos and Cambodia. Laos was officially neutral, and parts of eastern Cambodia were safe zones, perfect for the North to use. Although initially simple footpaths and bicycle trails, the Ho Chi Minh Trail evolved into dirt roads suitable for trucks and heavy equipment. Supplies such as food, weapons, ammunition, and troops were transported along the trail from the north and served as a major asset during the conflict. Like the Viet Cong, the South also had allies, and by 1960, the U.S. had sent thousands of military advisors to South Vietnam. Although a noticeable presence, the U.S.'s goal was to train and support South Vietnamese forces, not directly enter combat. Fighting ensued for years, and in August of 1964, the U.S. alleged that its naval ships were attacked by North Vietnamese patrol boats. It was August 2, 1964, the USS Maddox was on a surveillance mission in the Gulf of Tonkin when it was approached by 3 North Vietnamese patrol boats. Allegedly, the boats attacked, and the USS Maddox returned fire, warding the ships off. Then, on August 4th, just 2 days later, another attack allegedly took place against the USS Maddox and the USS Turner Joy. This was later disputed, possibly due to a confused radar or sonar reading, but President Lyndon B. Johnson presented this as an unprovoked attack on U.S. forces. This led to Congress passing the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution on August 7, 1964. This gave President Lyndon authority to use all necessary measures to protect U.S. interests in Southeast Asia. Operation Rolling Thunder. Once the resolution had been passed by Congress, the U.S. military launched Operation Rolling Thunder. This saw full U.S. involvement in Vietnam, boots on the ground, and a massive bombing campaign against North Vietnam lasting over 3 years. The U.S. dropped hundreds of thousands of bombs, striking military targets, supply routes like the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and industrial areas. Now, the campaign also hoped to break the North's morale, but with the use of strong air defenses, the North managed to limit the impact. Operation Rolling Thunder still caused mass destruction and civilian casualties, which increased the already growing anti-war sentiment back home. Vietnam was a country with dense jungles and thick vegetation, which is where most of the combat took place. The Viet Cong resorted to guerrilla warfare tactics, such as ambushes, booby traps, tunnels, and hit-and-run strategies. The Viet Cong also blended in with the civilians, making it increasingly difficult for U.S. troops to determine friend from foe when they could even see them. Combat often saw sudden, close-range firefights in dense foliage with poor visibility. The constant threat of ambush and traps took a heavy toll on the troops, with extreme stress and paranoia running rampant amongst the ranks. The North and the Viet Cong also saw to the use of psychological warfare. The most famous use of psychological warfare was from Hanoi Hannah, a radio broadcaster in North Vietnam.
GI, your government has abandoned you. They have ordered you to die. GI, do not trust them. Defect, GI. It is a very good idea to leave a sinking ship. They lie to you, GI. You know you cannot win this war. Your rich leaders grow richer while you die in the swamp, GI. They will give you a medal, GI, but only after you are dead. You have lost this war, GI. Your army will leave you behind. GI, your airplanes bomb your own men. You are not safe here. Your pilots do not care that you are down here, GI.
She read out the names of soldiers, cited U.S. anti-war protests, and claimed their efforts were a lost cause. This added fuel to the growing stress and paranoia amongst U.S. troops, and even resulted in some defecting from the military. On January 30th, 1968, during the Vietnamese New Year, also known as Tet, the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese launched a massive, coordinated surprise attack on over 100 cities in South Vietnam, now known as the Tet Offensive. Due to the holiday, a ceasefire was expected, but U.S. troops remained ready and managed to push back, but this ultimately shifted the public's perception of the war. The U.S. was losing, and the Tet Offensive served as a turning point in public opinion. The brutality of the war raged for years. A notable instance was the My Lai massacre that took place on March 16, 1968. The incident took place in the My Lai hamlet, located in the Sun, My village of the Quang Ngai province. U.S. Army soldiers from C Company, 1st Battalion, 20th Infantry Regiment, 11th Brigade, and B Company, 4th Battalion, 3rd Infantry Regiment, 11th Brigade of the 23rd American Division, murdered, raped, and tortured an estimated 300 to 500 unarmed Vietnamese civilians. The massacre was initially covered up by the U.S. military, but was exposed by whistleblowers and journalists over a year later. During the massacre, a warrant officer by the name of Hugh Thompson Jr. was flying a scouting mission when he saw U.S. troops firing on civilians. He landed his helicopter and began escorting civilians to safety, immediately reporting what happened to his superiors. His account of what occurred helped spark investigations. Only one officer, Lieutenant William Calley, was convicted and served only 3.5 years under house arrest. With Vietnam being the first televised war, many Americans saw the brutality of the war firsthand. Graphic footage of fighting, bombings, and civilian casualties aired nightly. By the late 1960s, protests were popping up all over the U.S., especially on university campuses. On May 4, 1970, students at Kent State University in Ohio organized a protest against the war in Vietnam. The Ohio National Guard responded, and troops opened fire on unarmed college students. The result was 4 students killed and 9 others wounded. This fueled more protests at colleges and universities nationwide, and by the early 1970s, most Americans no longer supported the war. In 1969, President Richard Nixon assumed office and announced Vietnamization, a strategy to gradually withdraw U.S. troops and shift the burden of combat to the South Vietnamese Army. This aimed to reduce U.S. involvement while still supporting South Vietnam with weapons, training, and air power. In June of 1969, Nixon announced the first withdrawal of 25,000 U.S. troops. The following years saw more troop reductions. His goal was to end U.S. involvement without appearing to lose the war. In January of 1973, the United States, South Vietnam, North Vietnam, and the Viet Cong all met in Paris, France, to establish a ceasefire and peaceful reunification of Vietnam, as well as end U.S. military involvement in Vietnam. The Paris Peace Accords were signed, and by March, the last U.S. combat troops had left Vietnam. Unfortunately, the ceasefire did not last very long, and North Vietnam continued to attack the South. The U.S. continued to provide aid but did not re-intervene militarily. Fighting continued for a few years, and in early 1975, North Vietnamese forces launched a rapid offensive, capturing territory with little resistance. By late April, they had reached the outskirts of Saigon, the capital city of South Vietnam. The South Vietnamese government had collapsed, and its president, Duong Van Minh, surrendered unconditionally on April 30th. With the North Vietnamese invasion of Saigon, the U.S. launched Operation Frequent Wind, the largest helicopter evacuation in history. Helicopters airlifted U.S. embassy staff, American civilians, and thousands of at-risk South Vietnamese allies. Over 7,000 people were evacuated in less than 2 days offshore to U.S. Navy ships in the South China Sea. Saigon was renamed Ho Chi Minh City in honor of the North's leader. An estimated 3 million people lost their lives during the conflict, and it served as the U.S. military's first major defeat. The North and South were then reunified under communist rule and are still ruled by the Communist Party of Vietnam today.